I'm a Marmite character. I know that, and that's part of, I do display that on LinkedIn. And when I was listening to those 16 voicemails, the last one was a death threat. If you don't answer the phone the next time I call, I'm going to kill you. When we talk about employed partners, I think that's got to be the biggest scam running.
Hello. It is Simon Marshall here from TBD Marketing, and welcome to the latest edition of But Is It Legal? This episode, I'm joined by the brilliant Amy Cousineau Massey. Amy, hi.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you.
That's great. We first came across each other on LinkedIn, and I think it's fair to say we've interacted with several dozen kind of posts of each other's over the kind of months, as it were, as well. But it'd be great if you could tell people a bit about who you are and what you do, and just start there, if that's okay.
Sure. I'm a self-employed consultant employment lawyer, which is a mouthful, but basically I'm an employment lawyer. I advise employees and employers, so both sides of the scale. And I tend to do more of the contentious type of work because employment law has two sides. You've got your contract drafting and your restrictive covenants and all of that, policies, advising, and then the other side, which is having a bit of a bun fight at tribunal. And that's more my area of expertise, and what I enjoy doing is having that kind of what we call contentious law argument. So that's me.
Great. And I think you're one of the few people that's featured both on our indies list and also on the kind of main list as well. You've got, can you tell us a bit about experience you've had time at major law firms before becoming a consultant solicitor as well? Is that right?
Yeah, so I've actually never worked at a top 200 firm. I've worked at, my training contract was at a high street law firm locally in the Southwest region, and it was a brilliant training contract because
Right.
it was sort of a sink or swim type situation where it's you're pushed in at the deep end and you've got a case, from day one you almost have your own files, and I really ran with that. It worked well for me. I had a great supervisor who was willing to share his knowledge, so I feel like I came out of that really well off with a lot of knowledge. At that point I did a lot of everything, so just civil litigation, commercial litigation, employment litigation, like all sorts of things. Then when I was headhunted by another more commercial firm still locally, and to start the employment law department. So I dropped a lot of the civil, like just general litigation stuff, and just did just employment law, it's such a huge area of law. It's such a big area. And you get a lot of people with specialisms in it. At that time, I still did pretty much everything. And so what I do has been getting narrower and narrower. And then after having children, I couldn't reconcile the traditional law firm model with being the type of mom I wanted to be. I couldn't make it work. I was not good at, I just felt I was wearing all these hats and I wasn't wearing them very well. I was rubbish at everything, felt like I was failing at everything. So I left traditional practice and set out on my own terms. And since then, I've pretty much specialized in just the contentious side of things because it's what speaks to my heart. So I think I do a better job on that. Whereas the contracts, if someone asks me to draft a contract, it just sits and I'll either sit on it or I won't necessarily give it all the attention it deserves because it's not interesting. I find them really dry. Whereas another lawyer, that would be the perfect thing for them. So that's kind of where I got to, how I got to where I am. And LinkedIn really only came about for me when I went the self-employed route.
How long ago was that, Amy?
So I went self-employed in August 2019.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had a good handful of clients that followed me, employer clients, so repeat instructions. I was, fairly well set up. And then in the pandemic, what happened, and I think it was partly fluke, and I think it did happen to a lot of lawyers as well. The individuals who were giving me the instructions, so the HR financial directors from those companies, were one by one made redundant, and I had then no links with these who were my best clients. I basically had no long-standing kind of retained clients and was just living off of work that was coming in day to day.
Yeah.
And in the December 2020, I was that December, I didn't open a new file and it was so fearful. Like I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to go back into an employed role. This is really, really frightening. I'd also had a baby, and so like my work had just gone down and down, and it is a frightening place to be. So that's when in the January, actually I think it was the December 2021 that I opened no new files. In the January 2022, I went full in on LinkedIn because I thought I've got to do something different. I've got to get out and get a name for myself. So I specifically started posting on the platform with a view of getting a name for myself. And so yeah, it's been since the January 2022. So yeah, it's been now 2.5 years. It's coming up on 3 years that I've been actively really pounding the pavement on LinkedIn.
What would you, if you gave yourself a score today about how well you think you've done over the course of that like 2.5, 3 years? How do we think we're going out of 10, 0 to 10?
Ooh, for different categories, different scores.
Sure.
I'm doing well. Let's put it that way. I treat LinkedIn like my biggest client because it genuinely is where I get the majority of my work comes from LinkedIn. And if it's not directly like a DM, those are gold, like, direct messages which say, hey, I need your help. If it's not that, it's someone who knew me from before, is reminded of me because I'm right in their face and they recommended me to their neighbor. But I still count that to LinkedIn because the reason that person I'm still fresh in mind is because of what I've been doing on LinkedIn. So yeah, what would I give myself as a score? I'd say maybe 7.5.
It's a good score. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's good to know these things. I love that. I love the intentionality behind it between that December kind of feeling. I think a lot of employment decisions are made in December by people. That
Yes.
just that natural kind of seasonal element to it
Yeah.
as well. And I think we come back with a renewed, maybe even ahead of springtime kind of vigor in January. Don't we go right? My mind is set. This is what I'm doing. And I love that intentionality behind it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Roll up your sleeves. I'm doing this, diet. I'm doing this, whatever it is. For me, it was I'm doing LinkedIn. I'm gonna do it.
Do you think it's fair to say that, with LinkedIn and everything that's gone on from the pandemic and the way that you set up to work, you've been able to do things more the way that, Amy wants to do them rather than like be dictated to, or you've got to fit in within these tramlines, as it were? Has it helped you on that front to kind of practice the way that you want to practice?
You mean being self-employed? Has it helped me? I
That and
think
LinkedIn and the conditions in the market. I think a combination of those things. Yeah.
I think so. Certainly would never be able to have this flexibility if I wasn't self-employed. I don't know any employer that would put up with my shenanigans. One thing that I often say on LinkedIn is how much I like to just stop what I'm doing and go make a piece of toast. And that really resonates with people across LinkedIn because it's sort of like the freedom to the point where if it was like a communal kitchen, I know people would think, this is ridiculous. We can't keep employing her. She's eating so much toast. So yeah, I just, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I think being self-employed has allowed me to have a voice where I can say, look, guys, I'm eating maximum quantity of toast. And you've got a happy lawyer, and that actually matters to some people in the same way that buying free range eggs is more important to some people than just buying barn laid eggs. It matters to some people. Some people aren't too bothered, but you can guarantee I'm an organic free range lawyer.
I guess, I mean, I found that as well. I guess some people, I'm a bit Marmite, right? Some people are more drawn to me because they really like Marmite. And some
Yeah.
people just, are not going to eat Marmite at
Yeah.
any stage, right? They're repelled even by the idea of it. And I came to that kind of realization a bit later in life. Is that fair for you? Would you say that people kind of either more attracted to working with you given the nature of your positioning and vice versa? Is that how it's worked for you?
100%. And I think that's the beauty of LinkedIn. If you're willing to express who you are, it's a natural filter for people who aren't like you and won't get you and won't, be singing from the same hymn sheet is you. So it's brilliant in that way. I'm a Marmite character. I know that, and that's part of, I do display that on LinkedIn and say, you know, not everyone likes me. I've had haters and I've had trolls, but then I do also have people who love me, and you know, lots of clients who loved working with me. So I think it is great for that reason. It's a filter and it gives you the better client mix, because there is a risk in a traditional law firm, and I experienced this, where you're beige, is what I would call it. And so you could, you know, one size fits all. Well, one size fits none, really. Like there'd be maybe one person in 100 that size is actually going to fit. And I had it to an extreme where I was kind of compelled to take on a client that I didn't feel aligned with my values. But that's part of being in a typical law firm, is you take what comes through the door, generally speaking. You know, if they're paying, then you're gonna do it, and there's no other criteria for when you say no to someone. And this person ended up, he was, you know, I couldn't call him quickly enough, and I remember coming back to my desk and I had like 16 voicemail messages from him in the space of a few hours. And he was just very, very demanding. And I went to my supervisor at the time and I said, I can't jive with this client. It's just what they're asking of me is too much, and it's not my communication style, or I'm not available enough for that. And the answer was, keep going. You know, you got to keep persisting with this. It's a billing, you know, paying client, keep going. And what it ended up, when I was listening to those 16 voicemails, the last one was a death threat. Yeah, if you don't answer the phone the next time I call, I'm going to kill you. Was what the client said. Yeah, yeah. And like my instinct my instinct wasn't like, oh, he's going to death threaten me. But like my instinct was, this is a person who doesn't get me, we're not communicating. And it resulted in, like, I guess that's a fundamental breakdown of communication. But it's funny because by that point, then the file was like whipped off of my desk and the person was like sacked as a client and all this like song and dance. But it's like, this, you know, could have been avoided because my instinct was there about this person not being a right fit client for me. So I think there's a risk to beige, one size fits all.
And I'm sorry to hear that. Sounds like an awful experience. And I
I
don't think
laugh at it.
I don't think I've had death threats to my face anyway. I don't know. So I'm glad that I haven't had to experience that, because that's just awful. But are there you've used that sixth sense of yours, I assume, then in the self-employed kind of side of things as a consultant, to have those early warning signals to say, actually, I don't think it's going to work for either of us if that's where it's going to go. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and I've said to clients, you feel more empowered to say directly to them what you're thinking and feeling. Obviously, as service providers, we can't discriminate, so you can't make a decision based on, you know, a protected characteristic or something. But if it's that personality is not necessarily aligned, or sometimes they want the moon on a stick, and I don't feel, I'm someone who is cautiously optimistic, and I'll give it to my clients how I see it. I don't do this whole managing an expectation, promise low, deliver high kind of thing. I'm just giving it to you how I see it and what I think is likely. But sometimes people do want, yeah, that moon on a stick, and I can say, look, I don't think I'm the lawyer who's going to achieve that for you, and I'm not willing to, you know, take that risk. I think you should contact someone else, and I will give a name, you know, refer on.
Have you found that when you share stories like this, because I've seen some of the stories that you've shared on LinkedIn over the last while, do you get DMs from other female lawyers kind of talking to you about things that they've faced as well?
Yeah, DMs, phone calls, let's meet for coffee, you know, all sorts of situations, like where people want to talk about their own lived experiences of being in a traditional law firm. Like I'm talking the pyramid shape, where there's a few individuals, usually men at the top, and then lots of fee earners and support staff kind of making it that pyramid shape. So yeah, lots of curiosity as to how I'm working and my previous experiences, definitely.
Are there a generation of external Amy's that we don't know about? Are you assembling an army of Amy's that
Yeah,
are kind of empowered to go out and do the right thing for themselves? Is that what's going on?
I did say so. One of my colleagues, Amy Langlois, she joined when I was at another firm. She joined, and we had sort of said, if you want something done, throw an Amy on it. But yeah, I think there's a real resurgence of in terms of consultancy, people who are rejecting the traditional model. And as a result of that, because I speak out against there are great things, and I'm not being critical of anyone who's choosing to do, law in the traditional sense, but I am critical of the structure, generally speaking. I can't speak for every firm. Haven't worked at every firm, obviously. But what I see, having advised many, many lawyers in employment disputes with their firms, is patterns of behavior that emerge, which are toxic and are not aligned with, being a thriving human being and living in this world. I think what I'm talking about, to be quite specific, is um, billing targets being unrealistic, support not being there, being promised something and not ever being able to achieve that because the target is then moved. All sorts of things like that, where you're working basically for a few individuals at the top, and you actually you'll never get up to that partnership status.
Over the course of your career, then, and the advice that you've given, so both in your own personal experience, but actually into the advice that you've given some of those lawyers, do you think that things are getting better or worse in terms of equality?
It's so hard to say. I want to say better, and I hope so. I feel so. I think there's a lot of women working now in law firms, and I think women make up the majority of graduates. Like, I think it's just tipped in the favor of women in terms of law school graduation. It's predominantly female.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact figure, but it's
I
over
think it's
50%.
52-48. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
52-48, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so there we have it. Like, that's a good indicator that there's equality in those numbers, but it's just what happens thereafter. And the nice thing is there's so many ways to practice law now. So being a self-employed consultant, you are kind of rejecting the model and saying, well, I'm just going to promote myself to equity partner. And when I say partner, I mean equity partner, because when we talk about employed partners, I think that's got to be the biggest scam running. I don't understand why or how you're basically, got your neck on the line, but you're still just employed earning salary and perhaps a bonus, but you're not actually you don't have an ownership element. So, yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me in any way, really, unless it's because you've got the promise of buying in eventually and being equity. But by being a self-employed consultant, you're rejecting that, and you're going for a more flat model. So you're sort of saying, I'm going to promote myself, which is what I've done.
Yeah, I've seen, so a couple of things, observations from my end. I think we've seen an elongation of the period which it would take to qualify to get into the salary partnership, and an elongation of the process it would take to get to the top of equity. And when I started out in this legal sector, it would have been 16 years from bottom to plateau. And now it's like 24 years to get from bottom to plateau on
Yeah.
average. And you think, well, those 8 years, they tend to favor certain groups and certain ethnic groups better than others as well. So, I think there are diversity issues that come off it. The one thing I was going to say to you, and it'd be interesting to hear what you've got to say about this as well, is that I think that a lot of those firms were predicated on thinking that clients wouldn't change their approach to it. But a bit like shopping, a few years ago, we realised we can go to Waitrose and buy something fancy, and then we go to Tesco's and buy something, mundane, as it were, and we have those things in the same household. And I think that law firms are a bit like that now. We go to things for big firms, and then we come to boutiques for things that we want, maybe specialist, or maybe just the price is right for what it is that we're getting as well. And I think that firms have built on the basis that wouldn't happen. But actually, what I'm seeing client side is, yeah, we want boutiques, we want self-employed lawyers on our roster. We know exactly what Amy's, or all of the people that we know, your Danas and Florences and Laura's and all those people we know,
Yeah.
Catherine Hyde, whatever, those people. Is that your experience as well? Is it changed client side?
I think it has, and I think it's just one thing that's surprising about the consultancy model is, and people don't really sit down and think about this, clients certainly don't, but they ought to, is that that lawyer, in order to earn their crust, what they need to survive, doesn't need to do nearly as much as what they were tasked with doing previous at a law firm where your billing target is X amount. So in the traditional law firm, the usual model is your salary is, you have your target would be like 3 times. So you're paying a third for your support, a third for your own salary, and a third for profit. So in order to make your salary, you have to be billing like 3 times the amount roughly. But I know firms where it's way more than that. But as a consultant, to earn your salary, you don't need to do much more than what your salary is. So it's very low. The amount of work that you actually need to do just to earn that crust is very low. And as a result, what that means for a lawyer like me is that I can spend more time with my clients. I can be more responsive to each client. I can, just be that much more agile and more, because I don't need as many clients. And I know with consultant conveyancers, for example, the turnaround levels for completions on, property purchases are incredibly faster, incredibly, because they have more time to devote to each file because they're taking on less because they're getting more of the profit. So in terms of service levels, it can be a lot higher. It might also be a boutique thing. People who become my client are buying me effectively. Like they want my personal take on things and they want the way that I deal with things. I'm pragmatic. I'll always pick up the phone and try and find a way forward to avoid tribunal if possible. And you have to have trust in your traditional law firm that they're not just hitting a billing target and therefore going to elongate your matter by, perhaps not taking that step, because it's not in my interest to actually do that, financially. It's in my interest for cases to run a long, long time. But actually, what's best for my client is if I pick up the phone and get to the root issue, solve that, and get a quick settlement, an early settlement, a beneficial settlement. And I'm led by that. That's one of my North Stars. So yeah, throwing up a lot of things there.
I love that. It's like a Jerry Maguire style moment, isn't it? It's like back to the service levels of kind of one-to-one sports marketing, as it were, as well. I mean, that really is that. I think that it's been interesting to watch the industry change so much over the course of the last 10 years. And I think it was accelerated by the pandemic as well.
Yes.
Just one last question for you then, because I'm mindful of your time. You're a busy woman, but any advice that you'd give to someone who's either considering stepping out as a consultant solicitor or LinkedIn or both, right? What advice would you give them?
No matter where you are in your journey, whether you're a law student, a trainee, you're already working in your firm, or you've stepped out and done consultancy or started your own firm, it is never too late to start your personal brand. And I think that is so empowering. It's the one thing that cannot be taken away from you and belongs to you. And it's a very powerful tool. So you should claim that. You have a right to be visible in a digital space, and you have a voice that needs to be heard. You have a unique viewpoint, and the world deserves to hear it.
Yeah, I love that phrase. The world deserves to hear it. Listen, Amy, it's always a pleasure. I've really enjoyed our chat today. I'm sorry it couldn't have been a bit longer. I think we could have filled 2 hours chatting, you and I,
We
quite
could have,
easily as
yeah.
well. So, but if for everyone who's listening or watching, if you've enjoyed this episode, and I think you will have done, please can you give Amy a follow? She's a wonderful voice on LinkedIn. You don't have to agree with everything she says, nor me. We're both Marmite in our own way. I mean, she didn't say that, but I mean, roughly.
I
But I think the important
am.
thing to do. I think the important to do at least is to remember you've got to try Marmite again every now and then to see if you like it today, right? So go back, have a look at what she's talking about. And more than anything, I would look at the methodology she uses, which is to really focusing on the groups that she's interested in representing. I think she does an incredible job of that as well. So Amy, thanks for all you do on the platform. And it's been an absolute joy catching up with you again.
Thank you for having me. Take care.